actually, when I'm having the opportunity to share your guitars with someone else, I very commonly talk about how you constantly negotiate the shape of your instruments, because I know that you pick up the guitars and you hold them against yourself, and your ergonomic approach is somewhat theoretical, I'm sure, but a lot of it is, I pick it up, I put my arm down, I go, oh, a little more off there, a little more from here.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, you and I have a substantially different physical makeup.
Yeah.
Yet, your guitars are also very comfortable to me because there's a commonality within our humanity and our biology, I guess.
Yeah, even if you're a little thicker around the middle, we're still more or less round.
More or less round. And our arm still only wants to go so high up.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, all of those things. And so...
and each one of the guitars is different.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm trying to make it conform to an ideal, which is me. I'm being flexible and allowing them to be different. And, you know, every guitar ends up being an individual thing, and people can approach them and be like, yeah, this one feels nice. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, trying on clothes, and you put one on, you're like, yeah, it just fits right.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that's why you try on shoes before you buy them.
Yeah, but when talking about an ergonomic guitar, so the ergonomic guitar, I think, at least as far as the common lore is concerned, starts a great deal with Ned Steinberger and Steve Klein, right? But Steve reproduces that shape over and over and over again. And in a more modern contemporary, we're talking about someone like an Ola Strandberg, who again reproduces his idea of an ergonomic guitar over and over again. Mm-hmm. But you don't. And so I think that there's fundamentally different approach, which I've not ever considered before this moment, but all three of you would talk about how ergonomics are important for your guitar, but they talk about their guitar design, and you're talking about it on an individual level. So I'm going to shut up for a second. What does it mean? Tell me about that.
I'm not designing guitars, I'm making them. Design is something that is a modern concept. Mm-hmm. When you are just making things, you just make them. You know, the violin was not designed, it grew effectively, organically from the work of, you know, multiple people trying to make something that worked well, sounded good, and looked nice. Mm-hmm. And then changed over time because all the necks are different from the way they were originally, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A design, being a designer is a concept that really only started to be needed or useful with the Industrial Revolution, where you started having mass production of articles.
Yep.
And the more mass-produced a thing is, the more important the design is, because if you're going to make 1,000 of something, you better have it, you know, more or less right. And if you're going to make 1,000,000 of it, you really have to have it right. Mm-hmm. Ironically, if you make 100 million of them, it can be totally wrong, because where's your competition? But, you know, so I started reading recently a book about Japanese houses, traditional Japanese carpentry and architecture. Mm-hmm. And when I say architecture, the author points out that there was no such thing as an architect until very recently, like post-World War II in Japan, because everything was made by the carpenter. They had, you know, everybody's taught by their, you know, the mentor before them, so everything is learned hands-on, passed from one generation to the next, and there were specific standardizations of measurements and things like this. So the house follows a certain pattern and a design, and so like the posts for the foundation are always a specific distance apart. And if you're making a room for this purpose, well, this room should be this dimension by this dimension. So there was no such thing as an architect. You had the carpenter. What?
I was at Osaka Palace recently. It's a large structure with very intentional architectural sort of designs in the foundation and such. There had to have been somebody, when you make a palace, like I get it that
It was
the
a
average
master
person
carpenter.
didn't make a. So you think they called them the master carpenter, even though they worked with masons and stonework also?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been an architect so much as maybe a worksite manager or something, who was like more like a
moat around
landscape,
the castle,
a landscape
and
surveyor.
such, and there's this sweeping up architecture of stones that are interlocking in the corners that are foundationally displacing the load and such. I think what you're saying is interesting, but I think there
And
had
I was
to
at
be
the
someone
castle.
who understood that a little bit.
The Nijo
differently.
Castle in Kyoto has the stone foundation leading to the moat that is almost exactly the same as the one in Osaka Castle.
Yes.
It was not an architect. It was generations and generations going back way long of people who were slowly figuring out the best way to create the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And you simply apply it at a different size, scale, or something. But so being a designer
All right.
is something that you only do if you are designing for industry, because you're not actually going to be making it yourself. And in, with these old Japanese houses, and I'm specifically talking about houses, not so much about palaces,
Okay.
but
So I'll let you carry on with your story.
Yeah.
But
my point is that it wasn't designed because the person who was building it was building it. It was being built by the people on the site who were, actually, pulling the saws and hewing the wood. So it wasn't separated. You didn't have a guy in a central design office in Tokyo saying, our houses in this district are all going to look like this, the way, a housing subdivision in Canada goes up. It was much more connected. They were the makers of things, not the designers of things. As it happens, though, the design is lovely because over a long enough time scale, you eventually arrive at perfection. And I'm a maker of guitars. I am not a designer of guitars.
So I'm wrestling with your terminology because my conception of design is about a thought process. Just like we talked about with the scientific method briefly for half a second. The design is a way of thinking. It's a way of rationalizing and applying logic through a well-considered process to arrive at the desired result.
Yeah.
So good design is well considered. And you have many aspects of your history from having multiple generations of scientists and engineers from your family.
Actually, you know what I just found out? The Sankey diagram, look it up, was invented by my great grandfather's cousin.
Okay.
Who he actually knew and lived with him for a little while when they were young.
Right.
So the Sankey diagram.
Yeah.
Engineers and scientists.
More directly, your grandfather was successful enough of a scientist that he had some patents which funded the starting of a university, a substantial university, or was part
something
of...
like that. Yeah, he was
like
one of the
that?
founding people of Brock University, and he was the second chancellor.
Yes. And there's something, am I remembering correctly, about perhaps artificial vanilla or
Oh,
something?
yeah. Well, that was he was a chemist, and he worked for a pulp and paper company. And he developed a way of basically cleaning. Well, the reason we don't have, waterways that are full of toxic chemicals was he found a way to take the toxic chemical, and instead of giving it away into the rivers and lakes, he's like, I can make something useful out of this and sell it.
Yeah.
So, and the water is clean now too. I guess that's nice.
Yes.
And
that became...
I guess that was just one of the things he did.
Right.
I mean, he worked for a company his whole life.
Yes.
In directing chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the point, you have a fine art degree, I believe, or at least you went to school for fine art.
Yeah,
you graduated with it.
Yeah, I actually graduated, but I was meant to get a BFA, Bachelor of Fuck All.
Fine arts. Fine arts, I think, is what the university would have called it.
But by the time I got to my 4th year, I kind of realized that this is not useful.
Yes, but before your 4th year, you were already working in the sculpture lab, where you were helping with people making sculptures with metal fabrication and stone and many other ways that you would work with this.
Yeah.
Mike, the point that I'm trying to make here is that you actually have a substantial history that equates to effectively a design degree that you don't know that you have.
Yeah,
and
well, a design degree is only as good as the diploma that hangs on your wall, which I don't have.
There's people with diplomas who aren't very good designers.
At it. Yes,
I know. People who don't have them who are great designers.
Definitely. But somehow the guy with the diploma gets paid more.
Sometimes.
That's an aside.
Sometimes.
Anyway, but that's just, it all boils down to being a maker of things. And the more time you spend making things, the more informed you are as you go along.
Yeah, but I'm not letting you get past the point that design is a process of thinking that you actually do absolutely, from my perspective, you apply design thinking towards your objects because you were very rational and you were well considered and you were conceptual and you were very good at abstracting and then making that abstraction a reality.
I consider
and that is a process of design that most people actually don't have.
I would, that again, I guess we're talking about the same thing, but or in nomenclature, because for me that's not design, that's just thinking ahead of what I'm going to do. And in fact, dirty little secret is that I don't plan nearly as much as you think I do.
Sure.
A lot of those guitars, they come out because I see a piece of wood and I'm like, oh wait, I see where the guitar is in there.
Yeah.
And I clamp it into the bench and start carving away at it. And sometimes you change notions midway through, or sometimes I'll carve most of a body and they'll be like, actually this is a bass, you know.
Yeah.
or else, you know, I'll set it on fire and then it cracks and you're like, oh, but those cracks, and then I'll use that. That's planning ahead and being prepared to improvise. And whereas design, I feel, as a term, or being a designer as a term, means that what you are doing almost exclusively is separate from the action of creating.
Okay.
And mine is not separate at all.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts. And a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.